The African savanna baked under a ruthless sun. Heat waves rising off the cracked earth like spirits dancing between scattered acacia trees. Cicadas wailed their relentless song over the sea of golden grass. Ranger Elijah Becky, face carved by decades of wind and worry, guided his battered jeep through this ancient cathedral of life. His eyes, shadowed under a weather-worn hat, were the eyes of a man who had seen the savagery of nature, but also its unexpected mercies. 20 years ago, those eyes had locked onto a terrified silverback gorilla caught in a poacher's snare. And with hands shaking yet determined, Elijah had freed the young male. That moment, a wild creature meeting a human gaze not with blind fear but a profound, wordless understanding, had never left him. The villagers spoke of it still, the ranger who had saved a soul meant for the forest. Today, the sun rose with no hint of what lay ahead. As Elijah's jeep rolled near a crumbled termite mound, his breath caught. A lone lion cub, golden like sunrise, stood frozen in the rippling light. No mother, no pride, just a solitary baby with eyes as old as time. It didn't flee. It simply watched him with a quiet desperation that stabbed his heart. Animal and humanity verse: when souls meet under the sun's gaze, the wild remembers who came in peace. Elijah's boots sank into the dry earth as he stepped out, camera swaying like a pendulum, tranquilizer at his hip. The cub's coat shimmered, but a dark stain marred its paw. Blood, not old, not forgotten, but fresh. Elijah's eyes scanned the savanna's whispering grass, and his pulse quickened as he read the signs: tufts of fur torn in panic, deep. Gouges left by a lioness dragged into the tall reeds, the delicate line of tiny paw prints trailing hopelessly behind. And then, cutting across it all, a monstrous track. Scales had pressed the grass flat in a wide, gliding path, unmistakable, undeniable. Python, his throat went dry. He remembered the legends of serpents big enough to swallow calves whole. Bending low, he lifted the trembling cub into his arms, its heartbeat fluttering against his chest like the wings of a dying bird. He wrapped it in his canvas sling, whispering, "Little one, you will not die alone today." The air grew heavy, the heat pressing down like judgment. From the corner of his eye, the acacia's branches quivered, but there was no wind. When old debts come calling, the wild itself decides if kindness will be repaid. Elijah froze, mind yanked back 20 years. He had felt this same tension. Before the hush before the storm, the prickling awareness of unseen eyes. Back then, the silverback had emerged, bleeding, snared, helpless. Elijah had cut the wire and met the gorilla's gaze, not wild, but wise. He'd named him Bakery, the one who will succeed. Bakery had stared at Elijah with something almost human before disappearing into the emerald shadows of the forest, never to be seen again. Now Elijah's fingers trembled as he reached for his radio. Static crackled. He adjusted the dial, climbed. A knoll, but the only reply was the endless white hiss of empty air. The ranger station might as well have been a continent away. The cub whimpered, a thin mule lost to the shrieking cicadas. Elijah adjusted the sling, securing the cub tight. Against his chest, its thin ribs moving shallowly under the rough canvas. He began walking, each step kicking up swirling dust that stuck to his sweat-soaked skin. A shadow moved. The world held its breath. Then the savanna exploded with a sound older than language, a hiss so sharp it sliced the afternoon quiet in. Sometimes, the earth tests hearts with coils of fate, to see if courage can outlast fear. The python came like a nightmare-given flesh. 20 feet of muscle, armored in diamond scales, launched from the golden grass with a speed that defied belief. The first impact smashed Elijah to the ground, his back arching with agony as coils wrapped around his legs like living chains. Dust billowed, turning the world into a choking haze of heat and terror. The lion cub screamed, a thin, ragged cry. Elijah clutched it to his chest as the python's grip climbed his body, tightening around his ribs until each breath became a desperate, rattling gasp. His fingers fumbled for the tranquilizer, but the serpent's tail lashed it away, sending it cartwheeling into the grass. The python's weight pressed him deeper into the hot earth. its scales shimmering in the brutal sun like liquid metal. Elijah's vision darkened at the edges. Every instinct told him to let go, to save himself. But the cub's heartbeat pounded against his own, fragile yet defiant. "You will live," he gasped hoarsely, voice little more than a prayer lost to the swirling dust. "I swear you will live." Overhead, vultures circled lazily, drawn by the scent of fear. His mind reeled with memories of Bakery's dark, intelligent eyes. Was this how his story ended? Crushed and forgotten, another ghost in the grass? When hearts stand together, man and beast, sometimes the wild answers with miracles. Suddenly, the grass behind him erupted. A roar, low and impossibly deep, rolled across the plain like thunder. Out of the shimmering haze surged a dark shape, massive, silverback shoulders gleaming black against the blinding light. The gorilla, taller and broader than Elijah remembered, moved with terrifying grace. In 3 thunderous strides, it closed the distance, fists pounding the ground with bone-rattling force. The python reared up, mouth yawning wide in a hiss of rage. But the silverback did not hesitate. It seized the serpent's thick body with arms like tree trunks, bellowing with a fury that made the vultures scatter into the white-hot sky. The coils loosened around Elijah, the pressure lifting as the gorilla wrestled the snake with brutal precision. Elijah gasped, pulling the cub tighter, heart hammering as he crawled backward. Dust rose in great clouds around the titans locked in primal combat, *. The gorilla's eyes flicked to Elijah, a fleeting glint of recognition, a spark of shared memory across decades. And then, with a final wrench, the silverback flung the python into the air. The serpent landed with a sickening thud and slithered, broken into the tall grass, disappearing like a bad dream. The gorilla stood over Elijah, chest heaving, nostrils flaring. Slowly, impossibly, it lowered its massive head and brushed Elijah's shoulder with a gentleness that belied its power, a wordless thanks, or a long-promised return. Kindness given to the wild returns, even if it takes a lifetime. As the silverback melted into the shadows of the acacia trees, Elijah's eyes stung with tears he could not hold back. He staggered to his feet, the cub's head nuzzled under his chin. The world felt impossibly bright, the grass alive with whispers of old debts paid in full. The radio crackled to life, a voice calling his name over the static. Elijah exhaled, each breath tasting sweeter than the last. He whispered to the cub, voice trembling, "You're going to make it. We both are." Far above, clouds gathered. In a sky the color of polished brass, casting a cooling shadow over the grasslands. And somewhere not far away, a silverback's roar echoed one last time, a promise that in the heart of the wild, mercy is never truly forgotten. The sun beat down like a hammer, heat waves dancing over the golden grass as Elijah gasped for breath, the python's crushing coils cinching tighter with every writhing shift. The snake's head reared back, tongue flicking, yellow eyes locking with his 2 predators caught in a silent, suffocating duel. The cub whimpered weakly in Elijah's arms. Then a sound ripped across the plains like a thunderclap, an earth-shaking roar. Deeper than any lion's, from the swaying grass burst a shadow so massive it blotted out the sun, a silverback gorilla, broader than a fallen oak, muscles rippling beneath an ebony coat. Its eyes were wild yet eerily familiar, burning with a fury that seemed to come from another time, another life. Animal and humanity verse, some spirits are bound across years, waiting for the day their bond is called upon. The python sensed this new threat and hissed, tightening its death grip. Elijah groaned, vision swimming, every heartbeat a muffled drum in his ears. The gorilla roared, a deafening, primal sound, and launched itself forward with terrifying speed. Bakery. Elijah knew that name before it even formed on his lips. Time seemed to slow as Bakery, the gorilla he had freed 20 years ago, slammed into the python's coils with unstoppable force. Dust and grass exploded around them. The serpent whipped up the gorilla's chest, its scales slicing across thick fur, but Bakery bellowed in defiance, fists pounding earth and serpent alike, a furious drumbeat of survival. When old kindness awakens, it returns with the strength of storms. Elijah watched, heart hammering against the lion cub's frail body. The python lashed at Bakery's face, jaws snapping with desperate rage, but the silverback dodged, grabbing the serpents. Midsection. With sinews of iron, Bakery twisted, muscles straining as the python writhed and hissed, scales scraped against black fur. The snake tried again to loop around Bakery's neck, but the gorilla slammed it into the dust with a sickening crack. The earth itself seemed to tremble. Elijah, still pinned beneath the tail's tightening coils, felt his ribs creak, darkness creeping into his vision. He sucked in shallow, ragged breaths, refusing to let go of the cub. Dust swirled like a storm cloud around them, each second an eternity. Bakery didn't relent. Massive hands pried the python's tail from Elijah's legs, even as the snake hissed venomous fury. Then, with a roar that split the very air, Bakery seized the serpent's head, eyes flashing with an ancient rage, and smashed it into the ground once, twice, a third time. The python's convulsions slowed. Its grip fell slack, coils loosening, until its massive body quivered and began to slither away, shattered and defeated, disappearing into the tall grass like a nightmare fleeing the dawn. Elijah gasped, air flooding his lungs, the crushing weight. Lifting, his hands shook violently as he checked the cub, still breathing, ribs rising with fragile determination. Mercy given once can echo for a lifetime, a promise kept in fur and breath. Bakery stood above them, chest heaving like a bellows, dark eyes burning with something beyond animal instinct. Their gazes locked. In that moment Elijah saw not a beast, but the same soul he had freed decades ago, the young gorilla, bleeding and snared, looking up at him with trust instead of terror. "You remembered," Elijah whispered hoarsely, tears mingling with dust on his cheeks. Bakery grunted, a deep, resonant sound that was almost human. Then the gorilla nodded, a small, unmistakable gesture of recognition, and without another glance, turned and disappeared into the tall grass as swiftly and silently as he had come. The plain fell quiet again, as if the earth itself held its breath. Elijah slumped back, cradling the cub, tears spilling unchecked. "Thank you," he whispered into the empty grasslands, voice raw with gratitude. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of acacia and warm dust, whispering through the grass like an ancient lullaby. He rose slowly, every muscle aching, adjusting the sling around the cub, and began the long walk back, each step lighter than the last. In the wild, every promise has its season, and some debts will always find their way home. Later that afternoon, the sun still a merciless eye in a blazing sky, Elijah sat outside the ranger station, a fresh shirt clinging to his damp skin. The lion cub now rested inside, swaddled in blankets, its thin chest rising in slow, steady breaths. The veterinary team bustled around it, voices hushed. Bruised ribs, dehydration, but it would survive. Elijah sipped lukewarm water under the shade of an acacia, hands trembling not from fear, but from awe. "Did anyone else see him?" asked the young vet, eyes wide with curiosity. Elijah shook his head slowly, eyes lost to the horizon. "No, just me." The vet offered a polite, puzzled smile and slipped back inside. But Elijah knew the truth. The grass had kept its promise. The lion cub would be watched, nurtured until strong enough to roam the plains alone, its rightful kingdom. And Bakery was part of that kingdom now, a ghost of the grasslands, half myth, half memory. Elijah looked out across the endless, rippling sea of green, heartful. Animal and humanity verse, the wild has its own justice, spoken in roars and whispers. He whispered to the breeze, the wild keeps its own promises. And as the cub slept soundly inside, the wind carried that vow far across the plains, weaving it into the stories only the earth remembers. If this tale moved you, if the courage of a tiny lion and the loyalty of an old friend stirred your soul, like this video and subscribe for more true stories from the heart of the wild. Because here every story breathes and some debts are never forgotten.